You are about to awake when you dream that you are dreaming. During the next 2 days, James Bond was permanently in this state, without regaining consciousness. He watched the procession of his dreams go by. He felt safer in the darkness, and he hugged it to him. On the morning of the third day, a bloody nightmare shook him awake, trembling and sweating. His whole body was strapped down, and something like a large white coffin covered him from chest to feet and obscured his view of the end of the bed. He shouted a string of obscenities, but the effort took all his strength, and the words tailed off into a sob. Tears of forlornness and self-pity welled out of his eyes. A woman's voice was speaking, and the words gradually penetrated to him. It slowly came to him that he was being comforted, and that this was a friend and not an enemy. He could hardly believe it. He had been so certain that he was still a captive, and that the torture was about to begin again. He felt his face being softly wiped with a cool cloth which smelt of lavender, and then he sank back into his dreams. When he awoke again, some hours later, all his terrors had gone, and he felt warm and languorous. Sun was streaming into the bright room, and in the background there was the noise of small waves on a beach. As he moved his head, he heard a rustle, and a nurse who had been sitting beside his pillow rose and came into his line of vision. "Well, I'm certainly glad you've woken up at last. Never heard such dreadful language in my life." Bond smiled back at her. "Where am I?" he asked, and was surprised that his voice sounded firm and clear. "You're in a nursing home at Royale, and I've been sent over from England to look after you. I'm Nurse Gibson. Now, just lie quiet, and I'll go and tell the doctor you're awake." Bond closed his eyes and mentally explored his body. The worst pain was in his wrists and ankles, and in his right hand where the Russian had cut him. In the centre of the body there was no feeling. He assumed that he had been given a local anaesthetic. The rest of his body ached dully, as if he had been beaten all over. He was preparing a short list of questions in his mind when the door opened, and the doctor came in, followed by the nurse, and in the background the dear figure of Mattis, Mattis looking anxious behind his broad smile. When the doctor spoke, he was forthright. "You have a lot of questions to ask, my dear Mr. Bond," he said in excellent English, "and I can tell you most of the answers. I do not want you to waste your strength, so I will give you the salient facts, and then you may have a few minutes with Monsieur Mattis, who wishes to obtain 1 or 2 details from you. It is really too early for this talk, but I wish to set your mind at rest so that we can proceed with the task of repairing your body without bothering too much about your mind." Nurse Gibson pulled up a chair for the doctor and left the room. "You have been here about 2 days," continued the doctor. "Your car was found by a farmer on the way to market in Royale, and he informed the police. After some delay, Monsieur Mattis heard that it was your car, and he immediately went to Le Chiffre's villa with his men. You and Le Chiffre were found, and also your friend Miss Lind, who was unharmed and, according to her account, suffered no molestation. She was prostrated with shock, but is now fully recovered and is at her hotel." The doctor paused. "Your own injuries are serious, but your life is not in danger, though you have lost a lot of blood. If all goes well, you will recover completely, and none of the functions of your body will be impaired." "For how long were you maltreated?" "About an hour," said Bond. "Then it is remarkable that you are alive, and I congratulate you. Few men could have supported what you have been through." The doctor looked at Bond for a moment, and then turned brusquely to Mattis. "You may have 10 minutes, and then you will be forcibly ejected. If you put the patient's temperature up, you will answer for it." He gave them both a broad smile, and left the room. Mattis came over and took the doctor's chair. "I have a personal message from M," he said. "He spoke to me himself on the telephone. He simply said to tell you that he is much impressed." I asked if that was all, and he said, "Well, tell him that the Treasury is greatly relieved." Then he rang off. Bond grinned with pleasure. This was quite unheard of. The very existence of M, let alone his identity, was never admitted. He could imagine the flutter this must have caused in the ultra-security-minded organisation in London. "A tall, thin man with one arm came over from London the same day we found you," continued Mattis. "He seemed to be Vesper's boss. He spent a lot of time with her and gave her strict instructions to look after you." "Head of S," thought Bond. "They're certainly giving me the red carpet treatment." "Now," said Mattis, "to business. Who killed Le Chiffre?" "Smash," said Bond. Mattis gave a low whistle. "My God," he said respectfully. "So they were onto him. What did he look like?" Bond explained briefly what had happened up to the moment of Le Chiffre's death, omitting all but the most essential details. It cost him an effort. Casting his mind back to the scene awoke the whole nightmare, and as the sweat began to pour off his forehead, Mattis realized that he was going too far. He laid a hand on Bond's shoulder. "Forgive me, my friend," he said. "It is all over now, and you are in safe hands. One last mystery, and then I promise I will go. What about the money? Where is it? Where did you hide it? We have been over your room with a tooth comb. It isn't there." Bond grinned. "It is," he said, "more or less. On the door of each room there is a small square of black plastic with the number of the room on it. On the corridor side, of course. When Leiter left me that night, I simply opened the door and unscrewed my number plate and put the folded check underneath it. It'll still be there." Mattis laughed delightedly. "I suppose you think that paid me back for knowing what the Muncies were up to. Well, I'll call it quits." He rose hastily as the doctor stormed into the room and took one look at Bond. "Out," he said to Mattis. "Out and don't come back." Mattis just had time to wave cheerfully to Bond and call some hasty words of farewell before he was hustled through the door. Bond lay back exhausted, but heartened by all he had heard. He found himself thinking of Vesper as he quickly drifted off into a troubled sleep. There were still questions to be answered, but they could wait. Bond made good progress. When Mattis came to see him 3 days later, the lower half of his body was still shrouded in the oblong tent, but he looked cheerful, and it was only occasionally that a twinge of pain narrowed his eyes. Mattis looked crestfallen. "Here's your check," he said to Bond. "I've rather enjoyed walking around with 40 million francs in my pocket. There is no sign of our friend from Smersh. Not a damn trace." "He's probably back home by now, being told off for not shooting me," said Bond. "I fancy they've got quite a file on me, in view of 1 or 2 of the jobs M's given me since the war." He obviously thought he was being smart enough, cutting his initial in my hand. "What's that?" asked Mattis. "The doctor said the cuts looked like a square M with a tail to the top. He said they didn't mean anything." "Well, I only got a glimpse before I passed out. But I'm pretty certain they are the Russian letter for SH. It's rather like an inverted M with a tail. That would make sense. Smersh is short for Schmiert Spionem, death to spies, and he thinks he's labelled me as a spion. It's a nuisance because M will probably say I've got to go to hospital again when I get back to London and have new skin grafted over the whole of the back of my hand. It doesn't matter much. I've decided to resign." Mattis looked at him with his mouth open. "Resign?" he asked incredulously. "What's the hell for?" Bond looked away from Mattis. He studied his bandaged hands. "When I was being beaten up," he said, "I suddenly liked the idea of being alive. Before Le Chiffre began, he used a phrase which stuck in my mind. Playing Red Indians. He said that's what I had been doing. Well, I suddenly thought he might be right. You see," he said, still looking down at his bandages, "when one's young, it seems very easy to distinguish between right and wrong. and one grows up wanting to be a hero and kill the villains. He looked obstinately at Mattis. Well, in the last few years I've killed 2 villains. The first was in New York, a Japanese cipher expert cracking our codes. It was a pretty sound job, nice and clean, too. The next time in Stockholm wasn't so pretty. I had to kill a Norwegian who was doubling against us for the Germans. And, well, he just didn't die very quickly. For those 2 jobs I was awarded a 00 number in the service. A 00 number in our service means you've had to kill a chap in cold blood in the course of some job. Now, he looked up again at Mattis. That's all very fine. The hero kills 2 villains, but when the hero Le Chiffre starts to kill the villain Bond, and the villain Bond knows he isn't a villain at all, you see the other side of the medal. The villains and heroes get all mixed up. This country right or wrong business is getting a little out of date. Today we are fighting communism. If I had been alive 50 years ago, the brand of conservatism we have today would have been damn near communism, and we would have been told to go and fight that. History is moving pretty quickly, and the heroes and villains keep on changing parts. Mattis stared at him aghast. Then he tapped his head and put a calming hand on Bond's arm. You mean to say that this precious Le Chiffre who did his best to turn you into a eunuch doesn't qualify as a villain? He asked. You wait till M tells you to get after another Le Chiffre. I bet you'll go after him all right. And what about Smash? I can tell you I don't like the idea of these chaps running around France killing anyone they feel has been a traitor to their precious political system. Mattis paused at the door. When you get back to London, you will find there are other Le Chiffres seeking to destroy you and your friends and your country. M will tell you about them. And now that you have seen a really evil man, you will know how evil they can be, and you will go after them to destroy them in order to protect yourself and the people you love. You may want to be certain that the target really is black, but there are plenty of really black targets around. And when you fall in love and have a mistress or a wife and children to look after, it will seem all the easier. Mattis opened the door and stopped on the threshold. Surround yourself with human beings, my dear James. They are easier to fight for than principles. He laughed. But don't let me down and become human yourself. We would lose such a wonderful machine. With a wave of the hand, he shut the door. Hey! Shouted Bond. But the footsteps went quickly off down the passage.